Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as always, Mark Weaver and Richard Kroll.
You know, it's a beautiful day in the United States today, Mark. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am always thrilled to have you, Richie, and we have a guest in the studio, which we'll introduce in a second. But we always do first, Richie, tip of the day. We'd like to share your wisdom of the world. And what is your tip of the day for our listeners that are waited with bated breath?
Bated breath. So, folks, you know, with the advent of increased nutrition and people worried about their diets and getting the right vitamins and minerals and fats, a lot of people, including my family, are turning to avocados. Some people love them, some hate them. I love them.
Amazing. I just had one today.
They are excellent, right? But what invariably happens when you try to open an avocado? It's a messy, gelatinous, it's a nightmare for most people to try to, like when you go to a restaurant and it comes out in these perfect slivers, it never happens at home, right?
No, of course not.
So here's a little tip to try to get the restaurant avocado cut effect at home.
How do you get the nut out of the middle?
That's another story. Oh, you mean for an avocado. All right, so here's how you do it. Take the avocado. Don't take the ones that are green. You want the ones that are greenish brown because that means they're the right ripeness.
Right, a little soft, right?
Take a very sharp knife.
Right.
Make an incision vertically around the width of the avocado.
Yep, got you so far. I do the same.
If you do it properly,
right,
you should be able to pull both halves apart.
Correct.
And
but the nut stays with one half. How do you get that nut out? Do you spoon it out? Or you do like I do, you bang it with the knife, the very sharp knife, you go boom, and it comes right out.
Wow, you're very advanced. You take that same sharp knife, because the avocado nut's actually pretty soft.
Right.
And you hit it gently.
Yep.
And it'll stick and you pull it right out.
Exactly. Yeah, I could have done this tip of the day. I'm not very good at it.
Further. Let's take a step further. Now you have your two halves.
Okay.
Most people then scoop it out with a spoon and make a mess. Take that same knife and cut your half now in half, so you have quarters. When you cut it in quarters, you're going to have a very pointy edge on each quarter. You simply peel that back, and the whole piece comes out whole. And now you can cut it into those nice slices.
It doesn't stick at all to the outer skin.
If you do it that way, it doesn't stick.
Okay, I have been tutored in the nuances of opening an avocado. Folks, make sure you remember that we are looking for patrons, and we have several patrons, but we're looking for more. If you can support the show, we'd really appreciate it. Go to our website, areweidiots.com, and go to our supporting listeners tab, or page, and right under there's a Patreon link, and there's several levels of sponsorship if you'd be willing to do that. Bronze, silver, platinum, and we have several of each, and we look forward to having some more patrons, and we'll announce you on the air when you sign up.
Folks, I'm going to add to that. I don't usually jump in on Mark's sales pitch, but we're talking about $5, $10, $15 a month. We're not talking about anything extravagant. So,
evidently, not many of your friends can afford $5 a month. Is that what we're finding out?
When you use words like bronze, silver, platinum, I think it elicits big dollar amounts in their head.
It's my marketing schema. Anyhow, folks, let's get to our guest in the studio, Mike Padgett, and Mike is Rich's brother-in-law, but he's I guess better known for the purposes of our show today as a conspiracy theorist expert. Isn't that the way you introduced him?
I'm going to go as far as to say expert.
Expert. So, Mike, welcome to the Are We Idiots show and our studio. And conspiracy theorist expert. I'm curious, before you introduce, what conspiracy theories are, how did you first become involved in this type of thinking?
Well, first of all, guys, I asked you not to use my real name, but I guess we will continue on now that it's out there with your millions of listeners.
I was not told that, but that's funny though. both listeners are going to know your name now.
I think it started with my parents. They kind of turned me on to my very first conspiracy when they told me about this fat, white-haired guy in this red suit that goes around and visits all these houses in one night and leaves little trinkets and gifts. I always knew from the very beginning that something was dodgy and a little fishy about that story, but I just kind of went with it, and that's kind of where my conspiracy theory interest started. But I remember in the 70s, remember that show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy as the announcer? I was always really excited about that. They talked about the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, and it was always so ominous, and the music, and that kind of just really turned me on. And then books, and we grew up. I'm not as old as you two guys, but close. But, we didn't have the internet and all that, but I remember going to my grandparents' house, and they had books on Egypt, and they had books on the pyramids, and so it's just always something that's kind of interests me. And over the years, the type of work that I do, I work a sales contract job, so I'll have lots of time off, and in my time off, I like to read and dig and connect the dots and put things together, and I'm just kind of a
Quizzical,
skeptical guy, anyways. So
Right.
it just kind of fits.
Cool. So we're gonna get to that in a few minutes. We're gonna do as we normally do, Idiot of the Week, and then we're gonna talk about several conspiracy theories that Mike's gonna share with us some of his background and data. And then we're going to conclude the show with some of our. We did this, Richie, about a year ago. We took some headlines that were kind of tabloid headlines. We're not making fun of conspiracy theories, but I guess we're laughing at it a little bit. We're going to have some
make fun of them.
most outrageous conspiracy theories, or most outrageous tabloid headlines. We'll do that to close the show.
I am not worried in the least about offending my brother-in-law. Let's just get that out there.
Never have been.
All right, so we're going to first start with Idiot of the Week, and as always, Richie, we're going to start with you. Give us your nominee, then we'll go to Mike, and then I'll go.
All right, so a Swedish, did I say that right? Swedish?
Yeah, Swedish.
Scientist speaking at the Stockholm Summit last week offered an unusual possible tactic in combating global climate change. Stockholm School of Economics professor and researcher Magnus Söderlund said he believes eating human meat derived from dead bodies might be able to save the human race if only a world society were to awaken to the idea.
He's a cannibal?
He's a possible cannibal.
He's willing to learn.
He's willing to learn. Söderlund's argument for human cannibalism was front and center during a panel talk called Can You Imagine Eating Human Flesh? At the Gastro Summit. This stuff really happens?
Oof.
Conservative taboos against cannibalism, he said, can change over time if people simply tried eating human flesh. When asked during an interview after his talk if he personally would try human flesh, he said he was open to the idea, but I feel somewhat hesitant to not appear overly conservative. Oh, I'd have to say, I'd be open to at least trying it. He suggested more plausible options were eating your pets and insects.
Yeah, that would be more plausible.
Now, here's just a quick side note. So, there's been cannibalism throughout the human race.
Right. I saw the movie Alive.
Yes, you did. Well, that's a different reason. A tribe in Papua New Guinea practiced eating their dead as alternatives to allowing them to be consumed by worms. The cultural practice led to an epidemic of a disease called kuru, also known as laughing death, caused by an infectious protein found in contaminated human brain tissue. Oof. They decided to stop the practice back in 1960.
I would think so.
So a legitimate professor in research is promoting this as a possible. I mean, it's just
and he said he would
mind-blowing.
be willing to try it, right?
And you didn't want to appear overly conservative
No.
by saying you wouldn't do it.
No. Speaking of side note, the HGTV show Flip or Flop, there was this blonde woman from California, Christina, I forget her last name, but anyhow, she was on for many years and she still has her own show. But I just read over the weekend that she just gave birth and she's been eating the placenta to try to avoid postpartum depression.
Well, and people are starting to drink their own urine. I mean, there's all sorts of, and some of it works, some of it's insane.
Yeah.
I'm not eating a placenta, even though I love my baby.
So, Mike, what is your nominee for Idiot of the Week? We have Richie's. And by the way, Rich is always the judge and jury of this episode or this segment.
So mine is about a Pennsylvania couple that's facing felony theft charges after their bank account, after their bank accidentally put $120,000 into their account. Did you see that?
Yeah.
So they went to bed with like $1,100 in their bank account. They woke up with $120,000, and you would think that you would call the bank or at least wait to see if the bank contacts you. But no, they went out immediately and they bought a car. They bought a race car. They bought 2 4-wheelers. They bought
They lent people money or gave people money.
They gave people money. They paid off all their bills. Life is good, man. Jackpot. And then that took 2 weeks. They were. They probably didn't go to work. They probably had a good old time. And then the bank called.
Of course, yeah.
Well, they actually did an overdraft.
Yeah, they took the money, right?
Yeah, the overdraft of $107,000, and they contacted this couple, and they got the wife on the phone, and the wife said, "Oh, well, we don't have that money. We spent it." And the bank's like, "What do you mean you spent it?" And then the wife did say that they would, they wanted a payment program.
Yeah,
they wanted a
right.
payment plan, and then the bank was going to work with them. And then the couple decided not to answer their phone and go dark on the bank.
Right. Yeah.
And so, the bank alerted authorities, and authorities came after them. They got put in jail, and now they're up for grand theft and receiving stolen property, and yeah. So that's pretty stupid, especially in this day and age where
They know exactly where you are. They know who you are.
The bank teller made a mistake on the last
Right.
letter. It was supposed to be an investment.
What town in Pennsylvania?
They're
They're
out in
usually
Western
from
Pennsylvania.
Florida.
In Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And so, that's my nomination.
Very, very well done. Mine is, this actually happened a while ago, but the court ruling just happened this week, so that's why it qualifies. A French company has been found liable for the death of an employee who had cardiac arrest while having sex with a stranger on a business trip. A Paris court ruled that his death was an industrial accident and that the family was entitled to compensation. The firm had argued that the man was not carrying out professional duties when he joined a guest in her hotel room. But under French law, you wonder why France is in trouble with everything and can't fund its society. Under French law, an employer is responsible for any accident occurring during a business trip, judges said. The man named only as Xavier X was working as an engineer for TSO, the railway service near Paris. He died at a hotel during a trip to central France as a result of what the employer called an extramarital relationship with a perfect stranger. The provider defended his position by insisting that sexual activity was normal, quote, like taking a shower or a meal.
Sure, with random people on a whim.
So anyhow, the employee on a business trip is entitled, the ruling said, an employee on a business trip is entitled to social protection, quote, over the whole time of his mission and regardless of the circumstances.
Ludicrous.
Unbelievable. So, Richie,
Well,
those are your three nominees.
Usually we only have 2, so it's a little easier, 50-50 chance to pick one. We have 3 good ones this week. I'm starting to learn that Europe is losing their mind in general.
You're just learning that?
Well, I mean, so we got French law, we got Scandinavia wanting to eat their neighbors. It's gotten a little crazy. So I'm just going to say some of these are a victim of the evolution. We think the United States has gone political correctness run amok. Europe is run afoul, apparently. So I am going to give this week's nomination to our illustrious couple that thinks if 120 grand shows up when you got $1,000 to begin with,
Free spending, free money.
right? Bernie Sanders has just paid me back.
I like that. Stay the hometown idiots. I like that.
We're going to keep it local.
So anyhow, guys, we're
I
going
got to send $1
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
to the bank.
They
They
need it.
or maybe to the couple.
So we're going to spend the next little while talking about conspiracy theories. And as I said, we're going to try to get through as many as we can, but some of these require a lot of background information. So we're going to try to abbreviate them. We're not going to be able to provide all the detail that you may be able to read and look up. But let's start, Mike, with what do you say is the definition for our listeners? What would be the definition that you think is best for what a conspiracy theory is?
And how it even started.
Yeah.
Well, the best definition that I've come up with over the years to kind of incorporate all the different aspects would be it's a explanatory proposition that accuses two or more people or a group or an organization of having caused or covered up through deliberate collusion an event or phenomenon of social, political, or economic impact. So, there's some things that people do identify as conspiracy theories, but they're not necessarily. There has to be some group or some organization that's doing something deliberate to cover up or to hide that's going to affect us socially, politically, or economically.
Okay.
In my humble opinion.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before the show, and I think I kind of warned you that I'm more of a skeptic when it comes to almost all conspiracy theories. So I may be pushing back on you a little bit during the show, and I tend to think in probability. Rich has heard me say that a lot on the show. So I tend to think that things happen and that truth eventually gets out, and that most things are pretty simplistically explained, but I'm certainly open to the possibility that that's not always the case. So I'd love to get into some of these as we go through them. So what do you think we should start with? We talked about maybe talking about the UFOs and the Roswell/Area 51. So let's start with that and lay it out for us. What do you think is the most credible conspiracy theory regarding that whole genre?
Well, as far as Roswell, so that's kind of like the mother of UFO conspiracy. That was Roswell, New Mexico, 1946, I think July 5th. Supposedly a UFO or flying saucer crash landed on a farm, and a rancher found it, but it was quite far out from the nearest town. And so when he found this, he didn't report it right away. He didn't really know what it was. He had collected some of the debris. It was kind of scattered over 3/4 of a mile, and he didn't have electricity. He didn't have a phone. I mean, we're talking 1946 here, out on a remote farm. And so supposedly he found this debris in late June. And when he made it back into town, he went to like his local pool hall or bar, pub, and told his buddies, "Hey, I found this weird stuff out on the farm here." And at that time, there was a reward for turning in or giving information about a saucer or a flying saucer. So he contacted the local sheriff. The sheriff came out, and it's a he said, she said. I mean, this has been going on for over 50 years, 60 years. But supposedly, this farmer found materials that, like memory foil that you can fold up and then it would unfold. Found there was no wires, there was no nothing that he had seen before. And so the sheriff came and they collected some things. The sheriff called the local Air Force base.
They came and got it.
Right. And then the next day, there was actually a press release from it was, I think, the Roswell Army station there.
Right.
That said we found a saucer, and this is where we found it, and we're investigating it further. And then 4 hours later, they retracted it. I mean, the story made national news. It was in the L.A. papers and Chicago papers, and front page. We found a saucer, and then the next day they retracted it and said, no, it was actually a weather balloon, and it was just some tinfoil, and it was just this, and it was a experimental balloon. And it's been debated, and it's been.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's even, the town of Roswell has a whole street and museums, and it's a huge tourist attraction. Even shows I loved, like the old X-Files, with David Duchovny.
Right.
A lot of the X-Files are based on Roswell and the.
It's a whole cottage industry there now.
Yeah, I think the main story for me with this is it's related to a secret military base, right? Area 51.
Which is in Nevada, not New Mexico.
Right, but close enough where this was opened up some people's eyes and exposed, hey, there's some weird stuff going out in the desert.
Right.
And was this related? Was it actually flying? The other theory was this flying saucer was captured, brought back into this Area 51, and a lot of the modern technologies come from that because we had, futuristic information from this saucer. There's also there were actual aliens that were in this saucer and one kept alive and one done experiments on, one died.
Supposedly, some people believe they were taken to Area 51 for experiments. The secular explanation was the weather balloons or these types of high altitude balloons that the government was trying to track Russian nuclear tests with. That's what they claimed they were trying to do, because at that point in the 40s, we were the only ones with the nukes, and Russia was trying to get theirs quickly, and we were trying to understand what they were doing with their testing, and so they supposedly had these experimental balloons. Again, that's the government explanation, and you're right, Rich. That Area 51 started quickly thereafter because they were testing the U-2 plane. The U-2 spy plane was out of Groom Lake or Area 51, and they were testing that, and they eventually admitted to using some of these. The CIA admitted to using some of these UFO stories as cover to explain what they were doing. So that actually did happen. The conspiracy was really more, in my mind, from the CIA using the UFO story as cover for what they were doing for covert activities. A lot of people believe the conspiracy was this alien cover-up, and there really was aliens. I don't see that, but again, I don't know enough about that either.
Yeah, I have read about the U.S. government using it as a cover story, so the Russians would think that we were testing experimental, high-tech devices and aircraft, and threw the UFO story out there just kind of as a cover, and the Russians would know that it was a cover and really think that we had this technology greater than we had. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, up until recent, they're still talking about that. They're still talking about it, and there's still.
But the U-2 did exist, and we did have it out of Area 51, and so did the F-117. That was another stealth program that was out of Area 51. So there was some of that going on. There's probably some of that going on right now that we won't know about for 20 years, and there's probably unexplained stuff happening at Area 51 right now that is probably some secret government military program.
The interesting piece for me, I know we got to keep moving on.
Yep.
Is a lot of the materials that were found, there was no explanation to, right? And they were more advanced than coming from a weather balloon, and that's where part of the theory started. But
they gathered all the stuff though, so you can't prove it.
You can't prove it.
Right.
But the people that were there, 50 years later, somebody says I was part of the cleanup crew, or I was, I saw some things. They're either playing into it, for.
Yeah, but they're also. I mean, again, I'm the skeptic of saying. I mean, these guys are not qualified to assess government materials.
I'm trying to get to a point again. If you let me finish the point. So, one of two things. I do believe there were special, different, unique materials found
Right.
The question
I
is,
agree with that.
Did they come from an alien spacecraft or one of these special testing
With experimental materials. Right.
out of Area 51 for secret covert military weapons?
Right.
That's what it
I think
comes
it's
down
the
to.
latter, but who knows?
Who
right?
knows? What's the
All right,
next one?
Let's move on. This one's very interesting because this actually did happen. It's called the MK Ultra project or whatever. But basically, I'll just summarize it real quickly. But basically, the CIA ran a program in the 50s and they were, again, under the same premise. They were losing their nuclear advantage, so they were trying to develop a program. Like, you ever see the movie Manchurian Candidate? They were trying to develop mind control and advanced interrogation tactics, including mind control. And they were experimenting on, that was a very wide-ranging program, but they were experimenting on U.S. citizens, some of them unbeknownst to them. So, Mike, what do you know about this particular conspiracy?
Yeah, you're right. So the story goes that during that early period of the Cold War, the CIA supposedly became convinced that the communists had discovered a drug or a technique that would allow them to control human minds.
Right.
So, not letting the commies have one up on us, we began our own secret program, MK Ultra, to kind of search for mind control, and they were doing it through drugs and tinctures and
I'm sorry, what was that word? Tinctures? What's
tinctures.
What is that?
Potions and poisons that could.
I've never heard that word before.
Could be weaponized.
I know you're going to use that in a future show.
Tinctures. I can't believe you used that in a sentence, but that's pretty cool. So LSD, I read that. What else did they do?
What didn't they do? They would use electroshock therapy. They would use different forms of torture, like extreme weather, temperature,
Sleep deprivation, I guess.
Sleep deprivation. It's stated that the program went from 1950 to 1973. Some claim that it just went super underground and that it's still going on to this day. But the chief chemist was this American chemist named Sidney Gottlieb, and it was run out of the CIA's Technical Service Chemical Division. And
Area 51?
I think this was in Virginia somewhere, but I was actually
It was done at universities all over the country.
Yeah, they covertly funded universities, research centers, prisons, detention centers in Japan and Germany, the Philippines. Many of the subjects, as you said, were unwilling or unwittingly dosed with high levels of LSD, and they would put people in comas, and they'd put them in comas, and then they'd inject them with high doses of amphetamines, and as they were coming out of this coma state, then they would electroshock them. Basically, they were trying to destroy, they believed that in order to control someone's mind, you had to destroy their mind, their ego, and then you had to fill in that void with a new mind or new programming.
Weren't they trying to get to some panacea of some kind of truth serum for interrogation? I mean, that's really what it came down to, right? Or mind control for a particular leader. They were doing like two different tracks.
Yeah, in the beginning, these experiments, they had CIA officers in Europe and Asia, and they were capturing so-called enemy agents or combatants and others who they felt might be suspected persons that were expendable. And they'd grab these people, they'd throw them in cells, they'd test them with, like I said, all kinds of different drug potions, electroshock, sensory deprivation, isolation, bombarding them with questions.
Sounds a lot like Abu Ghraib after the Iraq War. We were doing some of that then,
The
too.
question I have for Mike is it possible that you were a victim of one of these tests?
Well, I was probably one of the willing ones. They were telling prisoners, they were telling prisoners that they were trying to figure out a cure for mental illness, and they were telling prisoners that if you volunteered for these experiments, that we might take some of the time off of your sentence. They had people tripping on acid every day for a year to see.
I heard that's how some of the best songs have gotten written over the years. They're tripping on LSD.
You know,
the
this is
Beatles,
true.
the Beatles swore by it.
So here's
the 60s and 70s were the greatest era of music. We've always said
I've
that, right,
always
Rich?
said that.
65 to 75.
One thing, Richie, before you go, the crazy thing about this story is that the CIA director had all the records from this program destroyed in 1974, and basically without any real punishment. And that's the craziest thing is you don't know what went on because almost all the records, not all of them, but a lot of the records were destroyed. So
Here's my quick conclusion. This absolutely happened. You know,
Of course it
another
did.
government.
Tuskegee experiments too happened.
Yeah, this definitely happened. But you're right. With all the records destroyed, it's hard to know definitively how wide-ranging it was. So that one, check. That's a true one.
All right, so here's one listeners I think will probably get a little more kick out of. So celebrity deaths. And obviously, JFK is more of a government conspiracy, but he certainly was a celebrity. So we can certainly talk about that. I think everyone's probably most familiar with JFK and the various points of view there. But I wanted to also get to Jeffrey Epstein because that's the most recent one, which is gathering steam. So JFK, Marilyn Monroe, Joan Rivers, Jeffrey Epstein. Let's as quick as we can. Let's try to get through that. Mike, what are your thoughts on those?
Well, before I begin with getting into that heavy duty stuff, I do have to let you and your listeners know that I'm not suicidal.
Good.
I don't plan on committing suicide.
Good.
I don't have any illicit stuff on my computer. I don't own a gun. And so I'm happy, I'm healthy, and
So if something happens to you, there's got to be some conspiracy.
you know,
Good point. Very twisted, and now I'm confused and scared.
All right, so JFK. What's your 1 minute synopsis of what happened to JFK?
JFK. I would say that it was the CIA. Had some collusion in that. Some say that Vice President Johnson didn't like being number two, and that there was different things that he was trying to do. He was wanting to pull the troops out of Vietnam. He was talking about potentially wanting to go back to the gold standard and eliminate the Federal Reserve. He did
Pissed off the mafia.
Yeah, there's all of that, and there's so much disinformation as well. I mean, that one's been going on. You said eventually in the beginning that the truth comes out. Well, I don't know that the truth has come out about that one, and will that eventually come out? It has been 50, 60 years.
Some of us think the truth came out.
Well,
the
here's-
Warren Commission. But all right, so we have to move quickly. What about Marilyn Monroe?
Well, she was also involved with Kennedy, right?
Well, of course.
There
Sam Giancana, right?
There was some stuff going on there. I mean, I had heard even just recently. I had heard that she was actually taken to the hospital by Robert Kennedy, and his detail said, "What are you doing?" And they took her back to the house and let her die. I would imagine someone probably pumped her full of barbiturates because she knew too much.
And she slept with Robert and Jack,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Well, I mean, my conclusion there is I don't know who killed JFK. There's so many good choices. But, the single bullet theory is a farce. That there had to be multiple people involved.
I don't agree with that.
The Marilyn Monroe, yeah, I believe she was taken out. I mean, that's an easy one to agree with. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But that's an easy one to say, yeah, okay, I could see somebody taking her out.
Because of what reason? What's your most compelling reason why she was taken out?
She had secrets and things that could ruin the Kennedy family.
So did 50 other women.
But this was before social media and the internet, and things were easy to cover up. And
But he was sleeping with people all over the world.
that didn't come
But
out
not
till
as
years
famous
later.
as her, right?
Yeah, but anyone, if you're trying to, if your argument is that she could have information, what difference does it make whether she's famous or not? I mean, there's 50 other women who could have said the exact same thing
Because
she did.
knew the most.
Well, I do agree that she had a relationship with Sam Giancana, and that was certainly a triangle that was not advantageous to the Kennedy clan, for sure. All right, what do you, Jeffrey Epstein? I am very curious about what your take is on this because it's the most recent one, and then we'll move on to a couple more which Rich wants to get to.
Well, if you go back, you gotta go back into the 70s to where he came onto the scene. In the early 70s, he was actually hired to teach math and science at the Dalton School in New York.
It was an all-girls school.
Well, it wasn't an all-girls school.
Teenage
but
girls'
he was 24 years old. So he was close to the age of the students. But he was a college dropout. He dropped out of Cooper Union and NYU. And this is where it starts to get interesting. He was actually hired by the headmaster at the Dalton School by a gentleman named Donald Barr. And so Epstein was hired by Barr.
Epstein-Barr? Is that where the disease comes from?
That's a virus, which is a type of herpes, that can cause mono. So that's quite interesting. But guess who Donald Barr's son is?
The Attorney General.
The Attorney General. And what was the Attorney General's job? His job was to his office was investigating Jeffrey Epstein, and so that's an interesting coincidence. I'm sure there's nothing to see there, and there's no need to go into.
Do you
any
believe
depths of that.
coincidences happen?
Sure, of course, coincidences happen, but when you start looking around and you start connecting the dots, it's the same players, it's the same people, it's the same families, it's the same bloodlines. So there's coincidence, and then there's
I noticed a blatant tone of sarcasm when you threw that out, that I believe in coincidences, and this one must be a coincidence. I agree with you, actually.
Well, I will agree with you that the political class runs the country, and they always have been. So,
But people don't, what you just said, most people don't know that.
but I think more prescient. I think is the fact that Epstein had relationships with not only Clinton but Trump, and not to mention who's
So what relations did he have with Trump?
relationship.
What relationship did he have with Trump?
Well, he went on trips. He talked to him. He's a friend. Whatever.
Where are you getting that information from?
From reading it.
From what source?
I don't have it in front of me, but
Right.
Wait
So-
a minute.
so-
Epstein has definitely been hobnobbing with a lot of the top political
but
people
it's
and
funny
celebrities.
that people want to point. Now let me preface this by saying I'm not. I don't vote. I've never voted. I don't pick a side because I think that both sides are basically two sides of the same coin, and it doesn't matter who's in office.
well, I think we agree with that. I agree with that.
So, but to point to Trump, I mean, if you want to look at the facts, Trump was on his airplane one time, and Epstein wasn't even on it. It was just a ride back from Florida to New York.
But why do we know that's true?
Well, because it's documented.
Well, yeah, but your whole theory is that maybe some of the things we don't know or could be contributing to it. So all I know is Trump knew him from the New York area. They had met on several occasions.
Billionaires hang out with each other and know
Right.
each other, but they
Right.
weren't really friends. Trump was the only one that actually, when Epstein first became accused of these horrendous crimes, that Trump was the one that gave a deposition against him, and Trump actually kicked him out of his Mar-a-Lago. Epstein was a member.
My only point is to say is that this contributes to the conspiracy theory that's currently ongoing, in that Epstein had relationships with these
Clinton and
girls,
everybody else.
with Clinton and basically he could, if you want to believe the Marilyn Monroe thing, about he had information on both very powerful people. And that's why he was taken out in jail when the cameras just happened to not be working, all that stuff. So,
well, what's interesting about that is 40 minutes before the news actually reported that Epstein had died, there was a information that came out on 4chan from someone that actually said that he got switched. That they took him from the prison, that he didn't actually commit suicide. And that was a half hour before it was actually even known to the general public. So if you go, you can kind of look into
So
that.
what do you think happened to him,
What do I
based on
think?
the information you've seen?
What do I think happened? I think that he was probably switched out, that he didn't kill himself, and he's probably off in hiding somewhere and enjoying his life, because he has way too much information on people. And this is something that people should be up in arms about this. If you start to really look into what he knew and what and the players that were around him, I mean, the Clintons, Prince Andrew.
Alan
My point is, though,
Dershowitz.
why wouldn't he be taken out versus switched out and allowed to live? I can see the takeout
Dead
theory.
man switch.
Or what I believe is,
information.
if you're a child molester and you're going to go to prison, you're going to have an awful life. So why wouldn't you just kill yourself? So that's what I believe. But anyhow, we gotta move on because we're not going to solve this one today. All right, Richie, you wanted to get to some sports related ones, which I think we have about a couple minutes left. So we know the Chicago White Sox, the Black Sox scandal. We know that happened. We know Art Schlichter was betting on Ohio State football games. We know Tim Donaghy, right? We know that local guy here was betting. So what's your thought, Mike? Do you have any idea on any thoughts on pro sports betting? Or Rich, do you have any comments to set that part of it up?
So I believe in watching sports very closely for almost 50 years that there are games that are fixed, and the best way to do it is through referees,
right?
Because it's the hardest to prove. Now, the Tim Donaghy case, he wasn't necessarily betting on the games, but he was being paid to fix games,
right,
based on his calls,
right.
Even David Robinson, right, the famous center from Navy and the San Antonio Spurs, said
the Admiral.
There was one situation where he called a double technical on me, and all I said was "what," and I got thrown out of the game, like in the second quarter, stuff like that. And hey, it's he said, she said, right? Or how about the NFC Championship game?
The
New Orleans Saints. And
How about
the Rams.
it just happened again last night? Did you see that?
It's the most blatant pass interference call never called in the history of the sports. And you got to remember too, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, there weren't 500 camera angles.
Right.
There were 2 referees within 10 yards, front and back. And when you got the right camera angle, it was the most blatant pass interference I ever saw. So, and I know guys that were connected to Donaghy. And so, this stuff does happen. For whatever reason, the NFL wanted the Rams in the Super Bowl.
You really think that?
I believe that.
You don't think it just could be a human error?
Oh, this was...
I mean,
one guy in a bad
there's
angle?
There's lots of bad calls that happen all the time.
This is 2 guys... It's like me staring at you right now, drinking a glass of water, and I say, "Oh, Mark didn't drink that water. I just watched you drink a glass of water."
But it's bang bang. It's a split second decision. You maybe he like second guessed himself, and then he's like, it's too late to call it now. And
it was 2 refs.
I know.
A ref behind it and a ref in front of it.
It was an awful call. I'll give you that.
The ball is 5 yards away from the receiver when he's tackled. The 2 refs went up and talked to each other. One was even grabbing his flag. He was reaching for the flag. They went and talked to each other. Maybe Roger Goodell in an earphone said, "Guys,
communication,
bury the flag." And for whatever reason, I think that's an example. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was just a bad call. But there are a lot of examples in sports. The Eagles, 2 years ago, over a 2-year period, there was a refereeing crew that blew something like
Pete Morelli.
It was an average of 12 penalties against the Eagles and only 2 or 3 against the opposition in like 5 straight games.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
or maybe they're just not disciplined.
Your point about coincidences. Coincidences happen, but when they happen too frequently, and you start.
And thank God I'm not a bettor, but I can imagine if you were a bettor, it must drive you insane if people were like making calls or missing calls, and that's another thing.
That's what's led me to believe. How can you even bet games?
Yeah.
You could be on the wrong side of a cover-up game that's fixed. Right. So anyway, I think it's fascinating. I almost guarantee we know it is happening, but I think it's happening at a more grandiose level with the amount of money in Vegas and the multi-billion-dollar NFL, and there's just too much involved that can,
And the money's just going to keep growing now that sports betting is legal.
With fantasy sports, I now think fantasy sports are even impacting referees' decisions on certain touchdowns, or it's gotten crazy.
All right, so I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to finish up with the Amazon Echo. And I know, Mike, you have some theories on this, or whether it's Amazon or whatever, kind of Google Home or whatever. Home speakers, home technology. What's your theory?
Quick shout out to Mike on this, Weave.
Yep.
He's my brother-in-law. I love him. I also think he's nuts in a positive way. We have a lot of great conversations. He thinks I'm nuts. This one, he educated me on.
Well, So, we're living in a surveillance state, a surveillance world. All of our actions, all of our conversations are being recorded. And I remember our other brother-in-law, shout out to Ted, when he first got his speaker, I refuse to go in the house. I'm like, what are you bringing this thing in here for? This thing is recording every conversation that you're having. No, it's not. It's not. Well, I mean, Google just recently, came out and said, yes, it is recording. Even when you don't say, hey, Google or whatever. I don't have one of those things. I don't want to go anywhere near one of those things. I don't want to go into your house if you have one of those things. But a third of Americans have these smart speakers, and I just don't know why they have them. But they have admitted that they employ thousands of voice reviewers and people around the world to help refine their responses. So they are listening to you. They are recording you. You can actually go on and listen to the recordings that these smart speakers are recording. And it's not just when you're asking for where's the nearest restaurant that serves this or that. I mean, they're literally recording everything.
Right.
And I believe your phones are doing that too.
The phones definitely are too. Rich, you told a story, I think, on the air about that your wife had said something about a certain job or something like that. I think it was something like that. And then she got an ad for it. My one daughter was talking about something in our family setting, and about a half hour later, an ad for that came up on her phone. So the phones are definitely listening to, I guess, with Siri or whatever. So yeah, it's scary. And us being in the technology realm, we know that it's capable, and there's a lot of stuff being recorded. The question is, what are they doing with it? I mean, I know data is money, and data is essentially the product that they're selling now in a lot of these companies' cases. But I just don't understand how they're turning randomized, unstructured data into meaningful data that they can sell. That's what I haven't connected that part of it yet.
Well, they claim that their team listens to voice recordings captured in owners' homes and offices, and then the recordings are transcribed. They're made notes on, and then they feed it back into the software as part of an effort to eliminate gaps in speaker understanding of the human speech. So it helps to make a better product and to better respond. And that very well may be true.
I agree with that. The question is, but do they use it also to build like a profile on me? That's the question I have.
They're building a profile on you, and actually, if you get into the whole AI conspiracy, and everything is going into giant computers that are eventually going to be running us and running the planet. So all this information is data. So the eventual AI overlords and masters are going to know more about us than we know about.
I saw War Games. I saw War Games and Terminator, so I know that can be done.
Real quick, can you tell the listeners how they can hear what's being recorded of them?
Well, it depends on which.
Which device?
Which device? If you got Google Home or the Apple HomePod or the Amazon Echo, you can go online and you can research for yourself on how to actually listen to those recordings, and you can delete them, but it's only deleting it on your side. It's not deleting it on their side. So as long as everybody's does what they're supposed to do, continues to follow the rules, don't get out of hand, don't do or say anything you're not supposed to, you'll be safe. People are going, well, if I'm not doing or saying anything, then it doesn't really matter. Yeah, right.
No, I don't trust the government to handle things appropriately. There was one more which we're not going to be able to get to. I think you brought it up, Mike, when we were talking. A recent document released by the FBI warns conspiracy theories are a new domestic terrorism threat. We won't have time to go into that today because we're running out of time. But go out and look it up for yourself, folks. The FBI is claiming that. So we're gonna conclude. Just have some fun, Rich. We had this before, maybe about a year ago, some tabloid headlines. So I'll just rip through them, and you can make some comments, and we'll close the show. So these are headlines, and most of them are tabloid and obviously meant to have fun, but I think they're funny. God has had enough. Angels join war on terror.
Why wouldn't they?
And the byline says, exclusive look at Homeland Security's heavenly SWAT team.
Really?
I mean, can you imagine having angels coming after you? I mean,
it's a no-win situation.
Vaping's been in the news, Richie, a lot, and it's a bad epidemic. But no fear, new vitamin cigarettes will add years to your life.
Well, the first cigarettes that came out, especially in war times, were actually full of vitamins and also sorts of great nutrients because you didn't have access to them in the jungles and the desert during war.
Right.
So they started out as nutritious implements, and then they added all the tar, nicotine, and cancer-causing elements for whatever reason.
The
to
addictive properties.
to make them more addictive.
The Danish inventor actually
That's
says,
total BS, by the way, just in case.
the Danish inventor claims a pack a day keeps the doctor away. So I mean,
I may
little
start-
turn on the apple.
Should I start vaping?
Rich, you and I love the Planet of the Apes movie,
One of my favorites.
but evidently humans are. This is the headline: humans are turning back into apes.
Yes, we
and
are.
the byline says, "Inside the amazing story of de-evolution."
De-evolution. So we've reached a pinnacle and we're going backwards.
That's
You know what's
apparent.
weird? This is all week I've been scratching my armpits. You know what? You might be onto something.
We were on the prior show, Mike. We were talking about how great that movie was, The Planet of the Apes, and the ending was just amazing. It's still, any thoughts on that de-evolution, Mike? Do you think it could happen someday? Not in our lifetime.
I see it happening all around me.
Certainly, survival of the fittest is happening.
Yes.
All right, Rich. This is a heartwarming story I saw. A headline says, "Girl with 14 fingers wins typing contest."
You know?
The fix is in.
And she was probably a boy before she became a girl. So
Of
she has
ex-gender.
more testosterone to make her type even faster. It's just gotten unfair, but we can't announce gender specificity.
All right, last one because we got to close the show. But this is funny, Rich, because I'm no longer going to criticize us inadvertently making up the excuse to go into the war in Iraq, because this headline says, "Satan captured by U.S. troops in Iraq." The byline says,
The real Satan?
Satan. The byline says, "Devil and his minions had been stirring unrest."
What did they use? Like a vapor trap?
I guess he was in human form. I don't know.
You know what? This is the greatest news I've ever heard.
Everything was worth it. George Bush, he made up that story about Saddam and the weapons of mass destruction just to get the devil.
Yeah, we finally got the devil. It's taken what?
2,000 years.
2,000 plus. I'd say 4,000.
Oh, boy. All right, so, Mike, we're closing up the show. Any final comments for our listeners about conspiracy theories? Because you are a conspiracy theorist expert, Mike. What do you want to leave the listeners with?
I want to leave the listeners with, know where you're getting your information, and that 5 corporations own 90% of the mainstream media. So if you're only getting your information from the mainstream media, you're being disinformed. So think for yourself, critical thinking, and, check different sources, independent researchers that aren't mysteriously dropping dead. There's still a few of them around. So
Fake news show, remember?
Yeah, I've known Michael, Mikey, Mickey for 15 years. That's the smartest thing he said in my presence.
Well, Mike, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. It was fascinating, a little different for us, but we liked it. And make sure you listen next episode. Rich, we're taping this in mid to late September, and traditional TV is starting its new season. And we thought, what would be a good way to celebrate TV? And we'll talk about the importance of maybe one of the best TV shows of all time, Seinfeld. So it'll be a fun episode. We're going to highlight how many different Seinfeld references are part of our lexicon. And
Yada, yada, yada.
Yada, yada, yada. That's should be a fun reminiscing of Seinfeld, one of the best shows of all time. And as always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.